Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Look. Wrestling 101, classes in session. Pay attention to the teachings, that's from Andrew and Derek. I mean, these guys making a killing with no competition. Dynamic duo better than the Hardy Boys and the Dudley Boys. Everybody make some noise, mess with them, you get destroyed. They cannot be beat, take a seat. Watch them do they thing on the MIC. Face defeat, they cannot be seen like JC. Oh my goodness, it's a killing spree.
Hey, don't touch that down, because you are listening to wrestling superstar, Virgil at Wrestling IQ 101.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another edition of Wrestling IQ 101. I'm Andrew alongside Derek.
Yep.
And you can follow Wrestling IQ 101 on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And today we're joined by the Master of Ceremonies, Larry Legend, man. How's it going?
It's going pretty swell. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you for having me as a part of your show.
Yeah, man. It's so weird that you're the one who always does the introductions, right?
Yeah.
Typically, yeah, that's my job, is to bring out the personalities in our industry. But it always is nice to be not in the driver's seat and to actually be introduced, which at this point in my career I feel like is deserved, and also, makes me feel good about the fact that there are people who want to hear what it is that I have to say in regards to what it is that I do and what I've done for the past 15 years in the pro wrestling industry.
Nice.
Yeah. Hey, Larry, I got to ask you, what would it sound like if you introduced Wrestling IQ 101?
Oh, well, since it is my mom's birthday, I'm going to have to go with an old adage that she said to me when I was very young, and that's, son, if you're good at something, don't you ever do it for free. and what I mean by that is, how about maybe after we get done speaking with one another, I can cut a little intro for Wrestling Q101. Maybe a little sound bite, if you will, a drop from Larry Legend. But the viewers or the listeners, I'm not going to give them that privilege just yet. But I definitely will do you the solid. And there are I'd say about 3 podcasts that have used my tones for just letting people know this is what you're listening to. And I'd love to do that for you, but I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it right now for free. It's got to be. You got to tune in to next week or whenever you guys, if you want to use my voice and have me do kind of a soundbite for you, you'll have to keep on listening to hear it. I'm going to stand on that.
I like the way Mom thinks, for sure. She sounds like an awesome person.
Oh, she is. I mean, if you ever have seen, one of the probably milestones in my entire career was the appearance that I made on The Price is Right.
Yeah.
And not only did I make an appearance on The Price is Right, but I won really big.
Mm-hmm.
But the story behind that appearance is that was my mom's birthday present. Actually,
oh wow.
We were out in LA in August of 2013, maybe 2012 it was. And that was her birthday present, was to go attend the taping of The Price is Right. So, yeah, she's a very wonderful woman and instilled in me all of the skills to pay the bills, as it were. And, so this whole episode is not only about me, but just like my appearance on The Price is Right. I got to shout out my mom because it's her birthday, and, she molded me into the legend that's on the phone with you right now.
Nice.
Awesome.
Yeah, you definitely gotta do that. Now, when you decided to get into wrestling, like, what was your vision when you started training? Like, what did you want to be? Did you want to be a wrestler? Or were you just trying to do behind the scenes? Like, what was your vision of what you wanted to be in wrestling?
It's a great question. And after all of these years and just kind of not only with my mom molding me, I think about all of the personalities in professional wrestling that kind of inspired me to get out of the crowd and into the ring, as it were. And I guess, in a nutshell, I am 36 years old, which means that from 98 to, I'd say, 2002, I was around the ages of 17 to 22. And during that time, individual in the professional wrestling game that had the most impact on me was Paulie Dangerously, who started ECW. So when 9/11 happened, I made a decision that I did not want to all of a sudden one day have lost my life without having tried everything that, you know, was my dreams growing up. And I was living in New York around that time. I actually had just taken a hiatus from school when 9/11 happened. But sorry about all the background noise. I had taken a hiatus from school at the time, but I guess my vision always was to be that kind of personality that was, number one, a great orator. Because Paulie Dangerously, from, you know, when I first saw him in 91 as a manager in WCW to his heyday of being the promoter of ECW to right now as the advocate for Brock Lesnar, is one of the best speakers in the history, I dare say, of just public speaking. Everything that he says, the audience hangs off of his words because he's so good at putting it all together. So I guess in a lot of ways, when I was growing up, seeing his oratory skills on the screen when he would do his job as a manager, I knew deep down inside that he was able to use those same methods to motivate the locker room of ECW. And if you remember the film Beyond the Mat that came out in '98, there's a riveting scene where it's ECW's first pay-per-view, Barely Legal, and they kind of captured Paulie in the back talking to Axl Rotten and Perry Saturn and all of the wrestlers, his core, that made up ECW and that had brought them to the dance. So I would say that my dream, when I made the decision that I want to be involved in this, was to eventually start out speaking in some sort of way, whether it was commentating, managing, announcing, and then eventually to get to the level where I can motivate my peers to work for me and to, or work with me, I shouldn't say work for me, but work with me at creating something that had a similar impact as ECW did when WWF and WCW were the only kind of wrestling shows out there for you to absorb. My dream growing up was to eventually somehow find a way to get in and then create an empire like Paulie did. So, nice. In a nutshell, yeah, that was really my dream. You know, when I started in 2001, I got involved with training to be an administrative assistant for a local wrestling promotion in Maryland called MCW. They are now called MCW Pro, but when I was first introduced to them, they were Maryland Championship Wrestling. And, you know, shortly after 9/11, when I made that decision to go and, you know, get up off my rear end and do the things that I wanted to do in this life, MCW was the first door that was opened up to me. And although I went down to the school and I told them that, you know, I always wanted to get involved in pro wrestling, but I didn't think that I had what it took to be an actual athlete. I didn't think that I had the discipline to keep my body in order. They were willing to give me a chance as an administrative assistant, essentially a gopher, which later on down the line, I would find out that people like Jim Ross, you know, Jim Cornette, they all started off just basically getting coffee or running and grabbing sandwiches for the boys and things like that. So I'm very grateful that I was able to get my foot in the door through MCW as an administrative assistant, and in less than a year, they had made an offer to me to be an announcer. So
yeah, it's pretty cool.
Nice, that was dope.
You know, it's so funny because Derek and I were there at CCW 19 when you got inducted into the Hall of Fame. How did you first find out that you were going to be inducted? And you know, do you feel like you're too young to be inducted into the Hall of Fame?
You know, that's another great question, and I don't mean to kind of toot my own horn too much, but I really poured myself a tall glass of water. I really poured myself a tall glass of water in proclaiming myself as Larry Legend. So I actually was just engaging in this conversation with my mom earlier today in regards to, names and monikers and choosing a name that really cuts glass and speaks volumes about, what it is that you're going to present. So I originally started out in the wrestling industry as Larry Kennedy Phillips. And that was a name that was given to me, Larry Kennedy Phillips. It was an homage to to my knowledge, the only other African-American ring announcer of any, substance in our industry, and that was Mel Phillips, who was a ring announcer for the WWF in the late 80s, early 90s. So it was an homage to him because, I'm an African-American and a ring announcer, so, they gave me his last name. And when I say they, I mean Maryland Championship Wrestling. And at the time that I got started, it was around 2003 was when I first started announcing. And at that time, the Mr. McMahon character had really taken off as being this, evil boss, Vincent Kennedy McMahon. So I actually started out as an evil ring announcer. And they said, we can tie the heat that you're going to get from our crowd with the heat that Vince is getting right now on TV as this figure. So I was originally called Larry Kennedy Phillips, and that was all well and good. But when I finally made it to another organization, which was CZW, I felt that I needed to adapt and to change. I had been in MCW for a number of years as Larry Kennedy Phillips, and now I was in, the old ECW arena as the full-time announcer for CZW, so I needed a change. And, I've always thought that alliteration, Rick Ross, Larry Legend, those names that are, double letters, Arn Anderson, Austin Aries, I always feel that those names, they ring. They ring. You don't forget those types of names because of the ring that they have to them when you say them. And I made the decision to call myself Larry Legend, but I had no idea back in 2008 when I first arrived in CZW as the full-time announcer whether or not my career would pan out to be as legendary as the name that I had chosen to give myself. And I can say to you with the utmost pride and sincerity that over the course of the past 10 years, I have really carved out a legacy, including being inducted into the Hall of Fame at 36 years old, and to be the first announcer in CZW to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. And it really was somewhat overwhelming, but at the same time, just like I said to my mom earlier today, you can't go around calling yourself Larry Legend and not do it legendary. And that's why I went out there and I won The Price is Right. And that's why I'm 36 years old and I'm in the Hall of Fame. And that's why I'm not stopping until I have no more breath in my lungs. And forever and forever, and as long as I can, I will continue to carve out a legacy where people aren't saying, well, why Larry Legend? What makes you legendary? Because they're going to know through my accomplishments and my achievements as I go through this journey called life.
Yeah, I hear
That was an awesome night. Well deserved.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
definitely, for sure. Now,
Thank you.
Now, before wrestling, you attended NYU, and you wanted to do Broadway. What did you want to do? Did you want to be in like plays or theaters? Like what was your ultimate goal before wrestling?
So that's a great question as well. I was, I guess you could have called me a problem child.
Yeah.
I went to Catholic school before high school and before NYU, and Catholic school, a lot of rules. not a lot of other students that look like me, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a little rebellious and rambunctious, and my mom was more or less at her wit's end with what to do with me. I wasn't into sports at all, but I was really into wrestling. It was the one thing that my mom could kind of reward me with if I did good in school. And eventually, and I'll be completely honest, because I really was a problem child, after a couple different psychologists, one of them suggested that since I had such an energy and such a knack for being, present and on the scene, that my mom explored getting me involved in community theater. So I'd say at around 12 years old, I was enrolled into a community theater against my wishes, really. I just was dropped off, and here you are, you're in theater now. And I started to learn how to be an actor. I started to learn how to learn the lines and sing the songs and do the dance steps. And it really kind of directed me. I'd say from 6th grade all the way through high school, it directed me to not, get into drugs. I hate to say this, but a lot of the times, a lot of the people that I've grown up with, they have kids really early. Well, that's because they're living life. But I was kind of protected from a lot of those things because my mom got me involved in community theater, and I just kind of snowballed that, energy and life force from performance and being on stage all the way to high school and attending a performing arts high school in Maryland. And then, of course, in the high school where they're prepping you for college, I was encouraged to pursue acting that I started in 6th grade all the way through as a career. So I enrolled in NYU. I applied for Juilliard, the North Carolina School for the Arts, NYU, and the University of the Arts in Philadelphia. And I was accepted into the University of the Arts and NYU, but I did not get accepted into Juilliard or the North Carolina School for the Arts. But it was great because by enrolling in NYU and meeting all different types of performers and really getting my eyes opened up to all different types of performance, I made a decision, or it kind of dawned on me that, the kind of dream of being on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, or being Denzel Washington, or all of these kind of people that are out there and making a name for themselves. Well, that's not the only type of acting that there is. That's kind of the most heralded acting that there is, to be a Academy Award winner, or have a star on the Walk of Fame. That's really the most heralded. But there are all different types of performance. And if you really truly believe in what it is that you're doing, then nobody can, give an award to Denzel Washington that, doesn't, or him getting that award doesn't negate the type of passion and poise and effort and desire that is in someone who's being like a mime, or someone who's doing children's theater, or Shakespearean theater. There's if you truly believe in the art, and you truly believe in the performance, and you truly believe in the energy inside of you, then you kind of have to say, well, pardon my expression, but F what, the world says. I'm going to do what moves me. And as an undergrad at NYU, after taking classes like ballet and Alexander technique and scene study and dialects, after all of that, I realized that the type of performance that moved me the most was the type of performance that was professional wrestling. And I felt that as much as I liked actors like Tommy Lee Jones and all of the different ones who had encouraged me to be a performer, that nothing was more real to me than the performance of Jerry the King Lawler, or Ric Flair, or all of these larger-than-life personalities who the only way that they were able to make an impact on me is if their performance was true and they were believing what it was that they were doing. And they were. And that's what led me to the path that I left NYU and I moved back to Maryland, and I started to pursue a career in learning the ins and outs of pro wrestling.
Nice. That's very interesting. So do you think, like, when it comes to wrestling, do you think there's still more things that you want to accomplish? And could there be a possibility of seeing Larry Legend on the big screen or on Broadway in the future? Have you thought about pursuing those as well?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm not anywhere near finished what I am destined to accomplish. And, you know, I would not doubt that you could see me one day, like, hosting the Academy Awards or the Grammys, or when you talk about those personalities like Billy Crystal and Chris Rock and LL Cool J and the people that they tap on the shoulder to be a host. There's nothing inside of me that doesn't believe that could one day be my path. And as far as where I am right now, I feel like that I'm blazing a trail and notching my belt with different accomplishments and accolades that will lead me to that, as long as the Lord sees so filling to keep me on this earth.
Yeah.
So as cliched as it sounds, the sky is the limit. I never thought that when I got involved in pro wrestling back in 2001 that I would be announcing MMA or boxing or hosting and performing weddings and things of that nature. But here I stand at 36 years old, and all of those things are things that I do regularly. And I'm not going to stop. I am looking forward to eventually doing my first bar mitzvah.
Oh, wow.
I know that a lot of like Biz Markie makes most of his money right now doing bar mitzvahs. You know, Lil Jon too, and Nick Cannon, and these are all, you know, different rappers that, you know, behind the turntable and just make the party hype.
Yeah.
And that energy is something that I can bring to any professional wrestling event, and I feel that I know that I can bring to several different forms of entertainment. Please do not doubt me. I didn't call myself Larry Legend to, you know, toot my own horn. I did it because I plan on doing everything legendarily and leaving a legacy where it's like, yeah, that's Larry Legend. We know Larry Legend, and we know that if he's behind the microphone, it's gonna be stellar. So yeah, I see myself doing so much more. I mean, different windows and doors open up for me every day. Right now, I'm having a lot of fun. I'm having a lot of fun in my bedazzled blazers and my rhinestone bow ties and, you know, my Real D glasses with no lenses. I'm having a lot of fun right now. But that's not to say at any point that I wouldn't take up another type of performance or what have you, and achieve even higher heights than what I've done right now.
I am super jealous because I had a bar mitzvah and none of these people were there, and you weren't there.
Oh well, I mean, I learned about Biz Markie by bumping into him in New York City. He was at a sneaker shop, you know, all over Lower Manhattan. There are, you know, exclusive like sneaker shops where you got to get buzzed in. And one time I went into one just to look at some sneakers that I knew I couldn't afford, and the Biz was in there. And he was like, yeah, man, Boxy's up right now. I got to go down to D.C. for a bar mitzvah. And I didn't know what Biz Markie was doing, but I could tell you this much. He definitely could afford the shoes that I was window shopping, number one. And he was heading to D.C. not for his health, but to get his ducats. Yeah. So I know that, you know, and then I'm a big fan of Nick Cannon. Nick Cannon is actually an inspiration to me. As corny as he is, he's a huge inspiration to me, just his maneuvering through the industry. And he's another one that does like all types of exclusive parties out in the Hamptons and Long Island. And those two individuals that I just mentioned to you, they're MCs.
Mhm.
They're masters of ceremonies.
Yeah.
And that's a lost art. A lot of the times you'll see a pro wrestling show, or you'll go to a basketball game and you'll just hear a big voice. That's not a master. That's just a big voice. That's the same voice that tells you, stand clear of the closing doors, please. There's nothing to that. I'm way more presentational, and I'm way more in your face, and that's what a master of ceremonies is. So, yeah, a lot of these old, I don't want to say old, but a lot of hip-hop artists go on to, host these events, and very lucrative. Everybody wants their baby to have a great birthday, sweet 16 or bar mitzvah, so, it's really something that I would like to explore. And like I said, I'm doing weddings. I'm an ordained minister. I do, MMA and boxing. So eventually I'd like to put myself out there to not just marry you in holy matrimony, or not just to call you out from the red corner, but, also to be rocking the party, at your sweet 16 or whatnot, as only Larry Legend would be able to do.
Yeah, well, I wish I was 16 to have that, or 13 again. Larry, let me ask you this. What do you think about MLJ taking over at CCW? Do you think he's doing a great job filling the shoes that you left?
Absolutely. I mean, I'll say this. I got myself into a little bit of hot water at Cage of Death 14 when, unbeknownst to DJ Hyde or anybody else in the back, I essentially went out right before the main event of Matt Tremont versus DJ Hyde, and I had a sneaking suspicion in 2014. Mm-hmm. This is very shortly after I had won The Price is Right, that things were going to start to pick up for me. And that in the things picking up for me, I wasn't going to be able to commit myself to CZW as much as I had in the past. I knew in 2014 that I was going to have to miss shows because I was doing MMA, or eventually around that time Ring of Honor opened up the doors to me. And I had intuition that this was going to happen. So at Cage of Death 14, before the main event, I went out and I said, before we get to the main event, I got to speak from my heart, and I need to speak from my heart to the CZW faithful. And I essentially went into kind of a monologue where I was saying my goodbyes to the CZW fan base. Mm-hmm. And I called MLJ out to the ring with me. And I handed him the microphone in the time-honored tradition of passing the torch. Mm-hmm. I handed him the microphone, and I said to the fans, you may not like it, but this young man has the dedication to be here for you month in and month out. And that is so critical to building, the emotional attachment for a fan base for whatever the promotion is. Mm-hmm. Half of the reason that I was hooked to WWF growing up was because that in between the matches and in between the commercials, there was Mean Gene Okerlund talking to me about what we were going to see at Survivor Series. He became almost like a grandfatherly figure that I knew what I was watching when I would see him there talking to me. So I made the decision, unbeknownst to DJ or management, to go out and, in the time-honored tradition of professional wrestling, pass the torch to MLJ mm-hmm. to be the full-time CZW ring announcer. This was in 2013, maybe 2012, I'm not sure. I think it was 2012, right before 2013. And I subsequently was fired on the spot. DJ Hyde stormed out to the ring and he said, oh, Larry, you want to have your moment here at Cage of Death? I'll give you your moment. I guess you guys want Larry to stay, don't you? And the crowd said, yeah. And he goes, well, I got news for you. You're fucking fired. Now get out of my ring, you piece of shit. And sorry for the language, but those are the exact words that he said to me at Cage of Death 14 when I tried to pass the microphone to MLJ. Mm-hmm. But I truly believe what I said that night. And I truly believe that MLJ cares enough about the art of being a master of ceremonies that if there's anyone that I'm going to have hold the mantle of CZW, which was my mantle for many years consecutively, I believe that MLJ is the best candidate. Mm-hmm. I consider him a friend. I consider him a colleague. I think that he is incredibly intelligent and understands the wrestling business because he's a huge fan of it himself. And I don't feel that there's anybody that would feel that could do it as well as me as MLJ and CZW. Now, that said, there have been many times where I've come back over the years after being fired. I've come back at Cage of Death and done the main event, and Emil has always been super gracious and handed the microphone over to me. I've, made all types of appearances, and I said some really kind things about him and to him during my Hall of Fame induction ceremony. So absolutely, I feel that MLJ is deserving of being the Grand Master of Ceremonies of Combat Zone Wrestling. I just feel that in a lot of ways, Combat Zone Wrestling has changed drastically since when I first came in, and I don't want to say I feel bad for Emil, but I almost feel like that I got the last tail end of the glory of CZW. I got to send Drake away, into WWE. I got to send Leo Rush away. Well, I almost got to send Leo Rush away, but then Joe Gacy attacked me and put me through a barbed wire board. But I really got a lot of opportunities to do, and I really don't want to cast CZW as being, lesser than, but I feel like that I got to live through a little bit of the last glory days of Combat Zone Wrestling, the last days when they were in the 2300 arena. So I endorse MLJ wholeheartedly, but on some level I feel like, wow, well, I wish maybe he could have gotten a little bit of time to rock, like I did in the old days, Zandig days. But, it's CZW is not, their last chapter has not been written. They've got a legacy that they're one of the only companies that actually has a Hall of Fame in the wrestling industry. So, I don't want to diminish them at all by what I'm saying, but I just feel like I wish Emil would have gotten a chance to really live through some of the great experiences that I did as a ring announcer or an MC. But he's getting to carve out his own legacy with the Dojo Wars and with the things that he's doing right now. So, yeah, I endorse MLJ, and I don't think there's anyone better that could do that after I had gone on than him.
Yeah, one of our past guests is David Adams. How was it, working with him?
Well, David Adams is, I'll tell you a story about David Adams. David Adams is one of the first people to kind of make me feel like a star. I started out with a company called PWS, Pro Wrestling Syndicate, in 2011. I did one of their shows in Connecticut called Connecticut Carnage, and at the time, I think PWS would just use any ring announcer. Just anybody could be the ring announcer. But when I came, they were like, "You're our guy because you're really good at what you do." And we agreed on a price and everything. And my first PWS show after I had initially been made the offer, I arrived to the building, and David Adams, basically greeted me in the parking lot. And he was, really being super kind of subservient. Like, he was asking to get my bags, and he almost was posturing himself in a way that he was, constantly, bowing to me. Or, that he was, holding himself in a regard that he's below me. And, he'll tell you this story is the God's honest truth. I was like, first of all, you need to stop calling me sir, because I'm not that old. This was 2012, I'm like, so I'm kill all that sir shit, and secondly, nobody's getting my bags. I'm the announcer. I don't expect anyone to get my bags, but long story short, he essentially shadowed me that entire first Pro Wrestling Syndicate show. And the way that he approached me and approached his position was not that I want to cut Larry off at the knees and make sure that I'm the one that is eventually the PWS ring announcer, but essentially I want to learn from Larry so that if there's ever an opportunity for me to be the announcer of a PWS or any other organization out there, I know how to carry myself the way that this guy has been carrying himself, because this guy is respected and this guy is where I eventually want to be. And it's that attitude that has led him to now be the House of Glory announcer and the what else here? The WrestlePro announcer. He has the skills to pay the bills, and I feel that in a lot of ways he sat under the learning tree of legend when he first met me. And if there's anyone that I would also endorse to take up the mantle after I had moved on, it would be David Adams. David Adams and MLJ are two of the most stand-up individuals that I've ever encountered. If I were to put myself in their shoes, I could really hate on a type of person like Larry Legend. But Emil and David have never hated on me. They've always in so many ways learned from me and collabed with me, that I really consider them my brothers, the same way that the pro wrestlers often refer to one another as brother. Shane Strickland and Rich Swann, they're brothers. ACH and Davey Vega, they're brothers. Those are my brothers in this industry. They're two guys that I can always call on if, I've committed to a wrestling organization and I've got to do an MMA. I can always call on David or Emil because I know that they'll present quality. They'll show up looking dressed to the nines, which is half the battle in itself, is looking like something. And, I endorse them both, and they both are two stand-up individuals. And for anyone out there that's listening to this that wants to be a ring announcer, you can learn a lot from MLJ and David Adams, and essentially you are learning a lot from me because I learned a lot from them. I absorbed a lot of their ways, and vice versa. And I want to see those two go on to bigger, better, and brighter, and I just hope that I'm able to do a lot of that with them as colleagues.
Definitely. Now, it's kind of funny. You kind of touched on what my next question was going to be. You said half the battle was getting them to look like something. You're such a fashionable guy. I just was wondering, I've seen announcers in flip-flops, plaid T-shirts, and a whole bunch of things. I was just wondering what your take was on if you thought fashion was something that was important to being a ring announcer.
Oh, absolutely. Well, first of all, I just want to say I am an announcer that has been in flip-flops before, but only as the Caribbean Larry persona, and he only is allowed to rock at the Joey Janela spring breaks. Mm-hmm. So, if it's what I'm trying to say is that the fashion goes hand in glove with whatever the theme of the show is. Now, typically, you're the master of ceremonies, so you need to look like a young master.
Yeah.
And MLJ and David Adams both get a tip of the cap from Larry Legend for the way that they put it all together.
Yeah.
And, before the MC even says one word, just in appearance alone, the crowd can basically write them off as get this guy out of my face, or I want to listen to what this person has to say. And David, in his poise, in his charisma, and Emil as well, they really stand up tall for what it is that we do. And they are the pillars of not just having a voice announced from the backstage area, but actually having a young master in front of you that's giving you the business, as it were. And that's exactly what it is. It's the business. You got to look like something. If you're expecting a wrestler like Falaba to come out wearing the traditional sumo garb so that you can believe, well, then why should the master, who's there to tell you to buy the juicy hot dogs or telling you to buy the T-shirts or getting your 8x10 with Matt Riddle, why should that person not have the same poise and giving the same type of, attention to the overall production? So it's so important. It's so important to look that part, because I can't tell you how many times that I've had wrestlers, fans, vendors, ring crew come up to me as if I know the answers because of the way that I look. Mm-hmm. They will ask me things that I have no clue about. And it's a little overwhelming because I have my job to do and I know what to do, and a lot of the times people, just off of the strength of the way that I look, they come to me for direction or questions to be answered, and half the time I have no clue. But because of the swag and the way that I carry myself, it's part of the course for the position that this guy knows what's going on. We're going to go talk to him. So it's critical. It's critical.
I mean, you touched on Caribbean Larry. You also did that volleyball thing, right?
That is Caribbean
Yeah,
Larry.
that was, yeah, that's
yes.
right, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, yeah.
Okay.
So Caribbean. Yeah, that's funny. Wow. Caribbean Larry was born in Babe's volleyball land, which featured a lot of female professional wrestlers that we were familiar with, but just not in that particular setting. Yeah, that's where Caribbean Larry was born. But when you talk about intellectual property such as Larry Legend, Caribbean Larry, and all of these different monikers that I have, they're not copywritten. So it wasn't long before GCW, Game Changer Wrestling, who I had done things for, here and there as Larry Legend, were like, hey, why don't we get Caribbean Larry to do Joey Janela's Spring Break? That would be perfect. And, Babe's volleyball is, I guess you could call it defunct at this point. So, there was no static with that. And I've been able to be the Caribbean Larry character 2 times, actually 3 times outside of Babe's volleyball. And it's been a blast to be in like the Hawaiian shirt and the straw hat fedora and, with a lay on and to be out there in a different type of garb, but still, giving it my all and giving you that legendary that I do when I rock mics. So, yeah, Caribbean Larry was born in Babe's volleyball land, and then he kind of stretched his legs out, and you see him in GCW now. But who knows? Again, with us just going back to, what I eventually see myself accomplishing and doing in this industry, you never know where you might see Larry Legend next. Larry Legend might be a guest on Complex Up Late Nights with Rosenberg, who's a pretty good friend of mine in the industry, and that with the creativity of Peter, that's totally something that I feel like that he might actually explore. Might just be speaking that into existence, but I believe in that type of thing as well. But sky is the limit, and Caribbean Larry is a lot of fun. I have a ton of fun with him, and hopefully I can continue to carve out a legacy as not only being Larry Legend the Master, but also Caribbean Larry who just wants to have a little fun.
Yeah. Now, Larry, you've been part of ROH. How has that been for you, and do you feel like you're getting the creative outlet that you've been wanting there?
Well, I'm no longer with ROH. I have not been with ROH since October of 2017. The Global Wars Tour was the last event that I did with them. And, as far as credit is concerned, I don't think that, I'm really owed any kind of credit for anything that I've done in anybody's, locker room. Okay. So I don't think that I can say that I'm like, I haven't gotten the proper credit for my time in ROH. I did it. It exists on DVD and in other forms of digital media. So, I guess I don't really think that I can answer that question about credit that's due. It was a moment in time. It was, I'd say it was a good total 3 years that I worked with ROH, and I met a lot of people that I consider better friends, and I got to go a lot of places that I had never been before I was with ROH. So,
that's awesome.
I don't think any credit is due there, or any credit was denied. I did it. It was a time, and it was a lot of fun, and I learned from it, and I've moved on.
Nice. Now you've announced for kickboxing, MMA, wrestling. You told us you're looking to do some bar mitzvahs. Is there any difference in how you announce or your prep for any of those different events?
No. I can tell you this, and I've expressed this in other interviews. This is a funny little thing. I don't have to give half as much of my performance when I do the MMA and the kickboxing and the boxing events. And I think that has a lot to do with the age of the audience, the median age of the audience for, say, a pro wrestling event as opposed to an MMA or a boxing event. MMA and boxing events and kickboxing events, those are adult crowds. Those are adult crowds that know they're going to see someone's block get knocked off, hopefully, in the cage. Whereas when you're doing the pro wrestling, you've got so many little kids who are running up to slap your hand and just want to get lost in the moment of a pro wrestling show. I give more of myself. There is more. I'm exhausted after pro wrestling shows, whereas after an MMA show or a kickboxing show, you might actually see me at the bar or at the after party, because I don't have to give as much of my all for the MMA, the boxing, and the kickboxing as I do with the pro wrestling. And real quick, I just want to say, I do MMA, I do boxing, kickboxing, and wrestling, and I am an ordained minister. So, like, I'm not kidding about, being a master. So I can master anything: bar mitzvahs, sweet 16s, divorce proceedings. Like seriously, look up the credentials of an ordained minister, and you will see that I can legally go by the moniker Elder Larry Legend or Minister Larry Legend. Like, I can do many, many things, and I want to do many, many things, because pro wrestling is a massive conduit to society and to shaping societal norms. Mm-hmm. And there are so many individuals that have sprung from pro wrestling and from the tools that they have learned in engaging an audience that, you kind of scoffed when you were like, yeah, you want to do bar mitzvahs, but that's just one of the many things that I have the qualifications to do. And that, I mean, I don't want to make it out to be like, oh, and I'm trying to get paid. But at the end of the day, got to keep the lights on. So I'm putting myself out there, just like I have the skills and the foundations of a performing arts high school and community theater and NYU. I can do it all. And that's why I call myself Larry Legend. So it's only a matter of time before, I'm doing even more. Mm-hmm. So, just to kind of like address that, it's like I want to. There are not enough people in this world that are giving the Martin Luther King "I Have a Dream" speech. Yeah. And that's because in this age of technology where we're texting and Facebooking and tweeting and all of this stuff, well, people are losing the way to learn how. They're losing the communication skills to be able to actually speak. And I want to build a foundation for my God kids and for all of the youth that have the ability to hear the way that I speak and the way that I master. It's like I'm gonna go on. I'm gonna continue. And everybody's gonna sing. As long as there's air in these lungs and blood in this heart, everybody is going to sing.
Definitely. Now I'll ask the last question, and we'll wrap up. Who are some of your favorites that you've announced to the ring, and who do you personally think is the greatest ring announcer of all time?
Okay, so some of my favorites that I announced to the ring: Jon Moxley. Nice. It's a very fun name to announce. Devin Moore, believe it or not, is one of my favorite names to announce. Masada. Yeah. Is a really, I have a lot of fun with Masada. Of course, the Jake the Snake of Getting Baked, Ruckus, who was the one who kind of started me out to being more than just, Larry Kennedy Phillips. I enjoy anyone. Every announcement is a song. every single wrestler's name that I announce is a song. He is the bad boy, Joey Janela. His name is, you can ride the rhythm of his name and his moniker like it's hip-hop music. So when you give me a name like that to announce, where I can just, if you can picture the tones going up and down when I do that, he is the bad boy. It's all a song. So the wrestlers who have the tone quality, or they have names that I'm able to really harness that tone quality. Adam Cole. Those are the ones who really, I get goosebumps. I get goosebumps when I'm announcing, and they tell me that, Larry, when you announce me, you give me goosebumps. So, both, like all those ones that I just mentioned, they have names that cut glass, and it's easy for an announcer to announce. Oh, and the greatest ring announcer of all time, probably Michael Buffer.
Michael Buffer, yeah.
Right?
That's a good pick.
Maybe Howard Finkel, right?
Yeah. Michael Buffer did a good job by Let's Get Ready to Rumble.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay? Because he set himself apart from anybody else with that moniker.
Yeah, Larry, can you just tell people where they can get you on social media?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So my Twitter, LKP, that's is in Barry, L is in Larry, K is in Kevin, L is in Larry, K is in Kevin, P is in Patrick. That's BLKLKP is my Twitter. And then my Facebook, which just got reactivated 2 days ago, is just Larry Legend. I have a like page and I have a Facebook, Larry Legend.
Awesome.
You can find me on Facebook and Twitter. Oh, and then my Instagram, I have an Instagram that is Real Larry Legend. All one word, Real Larry Legend on Instagram. And yeah, thank you guys for having me.
Yeah,
and everybody follow me so I can let you know about the next time that you can see Larry do the damn thing.
You have just listened to the Wrestling IQ 101 podcast, powered by B Plus Player Radio.
One more for the good guy.